If you're a medical student, you've probably heard of Step 1 before, and you've probably heard hundreds of opinions on how to prepare and study for that test. As someone who recently passed Step 1, I'm here to share some of the strategies that I use to help me feel confident going into that test. There's so many resources available and there's so many question banks available, it's hard to pick one and stick to it. I was able to find a schedule that really worked for myself, and hopefully some of the techniques and the strategies that I utilized and that I share in this video today may help you if you're struggling to find a routine or pick a resource out of the plethora that exists to get you through that test. My name is Andrew Lewin. I'm a third-year medical student. I start clinical rotations next week, and I recently passed Step 1 just a short few weeks ago. My hope of this video is to share the strategies that worked for myself in hopes that if you're out there and you're struggling to find a routine that works for you, that hopefully you can utilize some of the strategies that I have to help you feel more confident heading into Step 1. So without further ado, we'll get into the video. Okay, so the first point that I want to get across is that Step 1 is not a test of trivia. It is not a test of memorization. It's a test of understanding. You have to understand disease mechanisms. In order to get to the understanding of disease mechanisms, you have to have an understanding of the physiology, the anatomy, all the stuff that leads up to making a diagnosis. For example, if the patient in your question has heart failure, you have to have an understanding of why that patient would have RAS activation. From that, you don't need to understand every medication that that patient may be on, like ACE inhibitors, ARBs, aldosterone antagonists. You can reason your way through why the patient is on those medications if you understand the disease mechanism, right? Renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system. If that is activated, you can then understand why the patient is put on those medications. So what's really important here is understanding concepts first. Memorization will come second. That's why choosing the right resources matters. Whether you're a lecture person or you like to learn from home, having the resources at home to help you understand and learn those concepts and get those concepts down is super important. For myself, I kind of bounced around some different resources both my first and second year, but right at the start of my second year, I really locked in the resources that I wanted to utilize and that were super helpful for myself. Those were Boards and Beyond, especially for content review, Pathoma, Sketchy for micro and farm, and UWorld for practice questions. Students tend to waste an enormous amount of time picking between the plethora of resources that are available. You know, they'll bounce from first aid to Pathoma to Sketchy, Boards and Beyond, Amboss. The list goes on and on for the resources that are available. You really need to find those 3 to 5, maybe even less, 5 is pushing it, that work for you. For myself, I utilize Boards and Beyond for content review. I utilize Pathoma for pathology. I utilize Sketchy for micro and farm videos. And then I utilize UWorld for practice questions. First aid was always my base resource. I would always come back to first aid after using those outside resources. You know, highlight, take notes in first aid. Whatever I was doing in class at that time, I would follow along in first aid, and I'd utilize that to make sure I'm, catching up on the same information that we're doing in class. If I were to give you a list of core resources that are super, super important and that I used, I would say first aid should be your base resource. After that, everything is supplemental, right? You can use Boards and Beyond. You can use Pathoma or Sketchy. Everything you're doing in class, you should bounce off first aid and highlight, take notes, and make sure that all the information is lining up with what you're doing in class. Because the information that's in first aid, all however many pages that book is, everything in this book has been highlighted. Notes have been taken in it. I've utilized this in class. I've utilized this at home. First aid should be your base resource, your core resource for boards. My next point that I want to get across is that most students think that practice questions measure their learning. I don't agree with that. I think practice questions create learning. Every question you get right or wrong, you should be reviewing and especially focusing on the questions that you're getting wrong. The questions that you're getting wrong on UWorld will have an explanation attached to them. From those explanations, for me personally, I would open up first aid and I would follow along in a specific chapter on whatever question bank that I was doing, right? So if I was doing a question on MSK, I would open up my first aid book to the MSK section, and I would follow along. I would jot down notes from the explanation into first aid, and I would look over that every single time I would read the chapter. Going along with questions, my biggest tip of advice is to start early. If you're an incoming second year medical student, I would buy UWorld and I would slowly get into it, start doing questions here and there, but really ramp it up once classes ramp up. I would spend time on the weekends doing question blocks and then reviewing them later in the day. From one question on UWorld, you could have topics such as pharmacology, pathology, histology, anatomy, all in one question. The explanation for that question, whether you get it right or wrong, will give you such good learning material. You can take notes on it. You can make cards on UWorld for it, or you can copy and paste and put into an Excel sheet where you can keep track of what questions you're getting right and wrong. Another good point about practice questions is that volume is not necessarily better than quality of question, right? You can do 10 questions on UWorld and review every single one of them, and it takes an hour. Or you could do a 40-question test, not review any of them, and it takes you 45, 50 minutes. You're going to get more out of 10 questions in reviewing them than you would get out of 40 questions without reviewing them. Good review takes time. You really got to spend time on the questions that you're getting wrong, really take notes or make Anki cards for those questions. This goes back to the first point, concepts first. You have to understand the concept behind the question. If you're not doing that and you're consistently getting questions wrong, you need to really ask yourself, what am I missing here? Is it the physiology? Is it the anatomy? Because all of those play into the disease states, and you can't understand properly the disease mechanisms if you're not understanding the physiology and the anatomy. Another big thing that I want to talk about is burnout. Every second year medical student will get a dedicated period of boards prep. I've heard so many people say, I study 16 hours a day. I stay up until 2, 3 in the morning studying. I passed step 1 and I was asleep by 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock every night, and I never studied past 10 o'clock. You need to set schedules that work for you, whether that includes working out, exercising, eating properly, going to sports. You need to find something outside of medical school that helps you de-stress. If I were to start over knowing what I know now, this is how I would break it down. I would wake up in the mornings, 5:30 a.m. I would do Anki cards for an hour. After that Anki session, I would stop and do a UWorld test, 20 to 30 questions. I would then take a break. I would come back later, maybe 20 minutes later, and review those questions. When I'm done reviewing those questions, I would do some more Anki, or based on the questions I was getting wrong, I would do a little bit of content review, whether it was Boards and Beyond or a YouTube video. After I reviewed, I would take a break. I would go exercise. I'd get out of the house, and then I'd come back. I would do more Anki. I would do more practice questions, and you rinse and you repeat, and that's what you do during your dedicated period. That's what worked for me. If I were to go back and start over, I would probably do a little bit more Anki, a little less content review, because as you go along, you're really going to get a grip on what you understand and what you don't understand. The people who succeed with step 1 don't need to be the smartest in the class. They need to have a schedule that they stick to. They need to be consistent. And more than anything, you actually have to love the process of learning this material with the goal in mind of treating the patients that actually have these conditions in the future. Find a schedule that really works for you and stick to it. If something is not working for you, exchange what's not working for you for something else. There's so many resources available. There's always someone out there that has a technique that worked for them that may work for you. Thank you for watching this video. I'll see you in the next one.